I read 46 books this year. Let's rank them. Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. I am Leah, and this has been a highly requested video. A lot of you have asked me what books I recommend, so I figured the easiest way to do it is to show you what my reading year looks like, to show you the different types of books that I read, and kind of go over my feelings of them, how I would rate them. I'm gonna use the S tier, A tier, the tier system to rate them. And maybe by the end of this video, you will have some new reads, some new recommendations. Maybe I can put you on to something you have never heard of before, and maybe you can have a new favorite book in 2025. So I do want to have a disclaimer and be like, okay, I have a very specific taste. There are things that I look for in a book. Just because I really like a book does not mean you'll really like a book. Just because you really like a book and I don't like it does not mean the book is bad. I do just want to put that out there. This is just for me, para me. This is just for me. This is just my taste. If you do like and you do agree with a lot of my rankings, you may like the books I've written. So I've written Apocalypse Still, which is a short story collection featuring Black female characters. A lot of the readers have called it horror. I myself would not categorize it as horror because I don't think it's scary enough, but it has been comped to Jordan Peele's short story collection, as well as The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Deisha Philyaw. So if you like either of those, you may like Apocalypse Still. I also have About the Boy. It's coming out in January 14th, 2025, and it is a young adult contemporary book. And if you like Instructions for Dancing by Nicola Yoon, Happily Ever Afters or One True Love by Elise Bryant, or Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute by Talia Hibbert, I think that you would like this as well. So if you watch this whole video and you hate my rankings, please don't read anything I've read. You will probably hate that as well. And I want you to save your time and your money. So let's get into how I'm ranking this. I'm using the tier system. S tier for me, I think is like a high quality book. Honestly, no flaws, perfect, beautiful, amazing. I would buy this book and put it on my bookshelf. And that is a really high honor because I have a small bookshelf. It's actually tearing apart and I need a new one. But I have a small bookshelf. I have limited space. So I have to be extremely picky about the books that I put on my bookshelf. An A tier book to me is a book that is really great, incredible, highly, highly, highly recommend. And I'm so glad that I read it, but I may not want to read that book again. That doesn't mean the book is bad. Like I said, great, amazing book. I'm just very particular about what I want on my bookshelf and what I don't. A B tier book, I think, is another solid book, but it just has so many problems for me that when I think about the book, I think more about those problems than about the book. And it just kind of irritates me and make me mad, right? A C tier book was like, good idea, not great execution. And then a D tier. Right now, I can only think of one book that I've read this year that I would probably give a D, and I feel really bad about it. But like, it's just a book that for me just did not work at all. And I feel bad saying that. I feel bad saying that as an author. I feel so bad, but the book just didn't work at all. And then I will not rate books that I've reread this year, books that I read specifically for review, because a lot of those are not books that I would normally read. So I don't think it's fair to be like, well, normally I don't like this. So let me just, I don't think that's fair. So there are some of these when I was going back over this list, I was like, I don't remember what this is about. And that may go into the not rated category. So I'm going to start with my most read genre, which is romance. I'm going to go from my most read to my least read. At the end, it's going to be a catch-all. It's going to be miscellaneous because I want to say I read a couple dozen genres this year. Granted, a lot of those genres did overlap, but I read a lot of different genres, so it's hard to categorize everything neatly. So everything else will be in a catch-all at the end. That is the long intro. Let's get into the rankings. Only for the Week by Natasha Bishop. This is the first romance book that I read this year. It is about this woman. Is it dual POV? I don't think it's dual POV. I think it's single POV. It's about this woman, her and her group of friends. They're going to Mexico. They're going because her ex is getting married to her sister. And then she has a crush on her ex's best friend, and her ex's best friend haven't really been in the room together a lot for most of the time that she's known the ex and when she was with the ex, but now that they're separated, now her ex is marrying someone else. She's like, I'm looking at this man over here. I'm looking at Rome. And so they make a pact to kind of, it's like a sex pact, like only for this week, we're going to have sex with each other, right? That is the premise of this book. I need to know who these characters are. I need to know what they're doing. I need to be all up in their business. So by the end, I can co-sign the humping, right? The humping happened in chapter 3. I was I was really taken aback by it. I was like, this is not usually what I like, you know. By the end of chapter 3, I was like, I'm not mad at it. I really I'm not mad at it. And I think for that reason, I would give Only for the Week an A. Like, it really took something that I usually don't like, because I think a lot of times people will throw in sex scenes that should not be there instead of adding plot just to make it like spicy and engaging. But it's like, we should be having plot here. But in this case, it worked. It worked. It worked. So that's an A book for me. So what attracted me to this book was that it is an autistic Black main character. And I have not read a lot of autistic Black female main characters. So I was really excited about this. It's a novella. I think her apartment got flooded. I read this a long time ago. I think her apartment got flooded and then she ended up having to move in with them. And so they're like trying to repair their friendship. And then they also end up trying to repair their relationship. It was the accurate representation of autism in Black women. She not being able to concentrate on the date because she's like, I fucking hate the clothes that I'm in. They're so uncomfortable. All I can think about it. And I've been in that situation as well, where you're just like, everyone wants me to do this, but I just can't, because right now all I'm focused on is this noise that keeps ticking and ticking and ticking, and I can't concentrate on it. Like, I have definitely been in those situations as well. So it was very nice to kind of see myself on the page. One thing that I was upset with about this book was that it seemed like the autism elements were not well incorporated into the love story. I think separately, like the autism rep, really great. The love story, also very cute. But when you were trying to mix them together, there were parts that felt a bit disjointed to me, right? But other than that, I do think it is a very cute story. I think if you're looking for a Black autistic female main characters, definitely read this. And it's a quick read. It's not, I want to say it's like 150 pages, not very long. So B tier. Oh my God, I love this book so much. Hockey player in the first chapter, he's going to meet Naomi, who is a streamer, and he's the moderator for her streams. And so he's gonna meet her for the first time, and he's super excited, but then he gets into a fight, and then he has brain damage, and then he has memory loss, and he doesn't know what's going on. And so he ends up moving into the house with Naomi. And then he quickly figures out Naomi's the girl that I've been talking to this whole time. So after he has amnesia, he gets his phone and it has all these texts from Naomi. And he's like, oh my God, this girl, she seems really important to me, because he was reading all the past texts. So that was the only relationship he was focused on. His friends were like, are you okay? And he's like, I don't care. And Sterling is like, is everything? He's like, I don't care about that. I care about her. And then Naomi she's like poor and she's struggling. So these boys move in. Finn and his friends, they all move into this house. And so Finn quickly realizes, oh, this girl that I've been chatting with is Naomi. Naomi does not know that the person that she's been chatting with is Finn. It does have sunshine, grumpy trope. The thing that I like about this is that Naomi is a sunshine, but she's a forced sunshine, right? She's like, I'm forcing myself to be sunshiny so that way maybe I will actually be happy. And then Finn is a grump, but he's like not trying to be, right? He's having trouble communicating things because of his brain damage. He's having trouble. He has a flat affect. He's having trouble expressing himself because of the brain damage. And I just thought that was so smart and so creative to play with these tropes the way that Deanna Gray did. And another thing is, like, in this romance, it's one of the first times I've ever seen characters talk about how lonely they are and how much they seek like romantic partnership and how much they desire that because they want something in their life that is fulfilling. I just think so much of this book is really well done. It is a hockey romance as well, but I think so much of this book is just so well done that it's an A tier for me. Sequel to Sunny Disposition, and in it you have Samson, who is the leader of the men's hockey team, and Aderin, who's the leader of the female hockey team. And so they are at a sporting place. And so Samson has a spot that is like his thinking spot, and Aderin's been there for like the past month. And so he's mad at her. He confronts her. He finds out that she went on a date, didn't go well. And she's just like down in the dumps because she's a serial monogamist. She wants deep, long, fulfilling relationships. She doesn't know how to keep it casual. Samson's like, I don't want deep, long, fulfilling relationships. He only keeps it casual. And so they make a deal that like Samson's going to be a serial monogamist. Aderin's going to be a casual dater. They're going to be friends with benefits. And at the end of the 3 months, if Samson is looking at other women, dating other women, having sex with other women besides Aderin, he loses the bet. If Aderin can't date other people, if she's only with Samson by the end of the month, if she can't have sex with someone else while having sex with Samson, she's going to lose the bet. And so that's the premise of this book. It is a very sexy book. There's a lot of sex in it because it is friends with benefits to lovers. I actually really love this book as well. This series to me is just spectacular. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. And it's an A book for me. Same comic company, and they were like rivals in college. And so this is a rivals to lovers book. They're rivals in college. Sage is like the top gun. Like everybody's like, Sage is so multi-talented. She's great at everything. And Noah is finally coming in. She's so excited. She's like, I'm finally have a professional comic job. And so they're automatically both like looking at each other because Noah's like, Sage is so incredibly talented and I will never be as good as her. And so they have kind of a rivalry going on because Sage wants to continue to be like the top gun at her job, and then Noah is coming in and she's doing a really great job. And so there's this bickering going on back and forth. It is a sapphic romance, and that is the premise of this book. For me, I don't know what it was. I just could not get into this. And I felt so bad because I'm like, I love the other books by Deanna Gray, but this book, I just was not feeling it. And I feel like this is a me thing because I've seen so many people really rant and rave about this book and how much they love it. And I wanted to love it as well, but I just don't know what it was. Like, I did appreciate how they were showing Sage's family. Like I love knowing about family dynamics and who these people are outside of a relationship and outside of work. But I was like, I don't know what it is. It's just missing something for me. It was missing something for me that was in Deanna Gray's other books, but that wasn't in this one. So for me, Outdrawn is a B. I saw this book at my local library and I thought, oh my gosh, is this a BIPOC werewolf romance? And so I got it because I thought it was a Mexican werewolf romance. I was so excited. I'm like, yes. It was not a Mexican werewolf romance. I actually took that book to go see a friend when I was reading it, and she was like, is this a Mexican werewolf romance? And I'm like, no, it's not. We all wanted a Mexican werewolf romance, but it's not that. It is about this woman. She is going through a divorce with a white man. That is very important to the story that he is a white man. She's going through a divorce with this white man. She's forced to move back to town. She doesn't have money. She doesn't have child support. She has to live with her parents that are all squeezed into their house. And so she's trying to like reckon with the fact that when she left her hometown, she was like everybody's wildest dreams, right? They're like, she's going to go to the Ivy Leagues. She's going to get a really nice man. She's going to live like the fabulous life. And she did, until she found out that like he was cheating and he was abusive and he was destroying her life, and she escaped and lost everything. And so now she's very embarrassed by that. And so she's like, oh, I'm just going to be back for the summer until I can find a job back in DC, and then I'm going to go back to DC. And while she's there, well, I won't say explain, her ex sex tutor, who they were like BFFs growing up. And so when she was 18, she was like, I don't want to go into college being a virgin. Nikki's my best friend. Let me have sex with him and he can teach me how to, be sexually competent, how to be sexually experienced. And so there are these flashbacks with their like sex tutor moments. I really love the sex tutor trope. It is one of my favorites. But there are these flashbacks with like these sex tutor moments where he's like teaching her about the different parts of sex. And then in the present, the two of them are like, oh, you know, she has said already, like, oh, Nikki would be such a really good, like, stress reliever for me. And she's like, maybe we could relive the sex tutor moments and I can show him all the different things I've learned. And then he's like, oh, I can't do that. I'm engaged. I have a fiance. And he doesn't have a fiance. He's lying to like put distance between them. And so this story kind of follows them. I would say that this is more of an upmarket romance, which is what I would consider someone like Candy Ryan as well. I think this was a really solid book. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the characters. I enjoyed the language. It was slower paced because the main characters, they're like 32, 33. And the woman, she has two kids, and one of her kids is autistic, and she is going through her first divorce. Like, these are grown people problems. It's not like, oh my gosh, I like this person. These are grown people problems. Even though it wasn't a Mexican werewolf romance, I'm still looking for a Mexican werewolf romance. I'm looking for a BIPOC werewolf romance. If you have any recommendations, please let me know. Not Kimberly Lemming. I already know Kimberly Lemming. Please give me new recommendations because I really, really want a BIPOC werewolf romance so bad. But even though this wasn't a BIPOC werewolf romance, I really, really enjoy it. I think the writing was solid. The characters were solid. The romance was really great. So it will be an A for me. It is the sequel to Before I Let Go. The one thing I will say, and this, it took me a while. I had to let the story marinate, right? When I first read that book, I was like, Hosea is so horny. Why is this man so horny? Like, but then I had to think about it. Like, his main thing was that he could not get it up for Yasmin because he was, grieving. And so she was like, he's not sexually attracted to me. He doesn't want me at all. And so all of his chapters were like, I'm very sexually attracted to her. I want her so bad. And I was like, oh, now it makes it. But I had to let that marinate because first time I read it, I was like, what is this? But now I get it. Anyway, This Could Be Us follows Soledad, and she is going through a divorce with her husband. She finds out that he has been doing some embezzlement. And so she has to divorce him. He's going through legal problems. And when Soledad first sees Judah Cross, she's like, that is the funnest man I've ever seen in my life. I want him inside of me. But then she's also like, well, I'm here with my husband who doesn't want me, and I'm horny, and I just want a man to touch me real bad. And I was like, girl, same. Her husband gets taken away by the FBI. Her assets are frozen. She's lost everything. She has nothing. I think it's very similar to Full Moon Over Freedom. Both these women going through divorces with their white men, they lose absolutely everything. And so it's really a bottom barrel moment. And then in the middle of this, she's also like, I have feelings for Judah Cross and I shouldn't because he's the man that put my husband in jail. And there's a lot of complicated feelings around that. And so that's kind of where we start off with This Could Be Us. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I was extremely frustrated with this book because I'm like, they should just go ahead and start humping. They should just go ahead and start humping. They both really want each other. Why is she like, actually, no, I need to make sure that I can do everything by myself. And I need to make sure that my kids are taken care of. I'm like, both of you desperately want to hump each other. Just do it. Like, why are we waiting? Why are we waiting? That is my one gripe with this book. Other than that, beautiful writing, amazing storytelling. Candy Ryan is really great. Honestly, I feel like she writes grown woman romance. I do call it auntie core. Like, anytime I see thank you very much, I'm like, an auntie wrote that. An auntie wrote it every single time. So I do think it's got an auntie coded, but it is still a really great book, and I gotta give it to her. It's an A book for me. So I don't know how I came across this. I think I just saw the book on Amazon and I was like, that sounds good. So I started to read it. And it has this influencer. I believe it's a British book. I believe it's the British. She gets this chance to go on this trip and promote on social media. The only problem is that it's a couples trip, and she's super embarrassed because she's no longer with her ex-boyfriend, and she doesn't want to pop out on social media and people are going to ask, hey, what about your last relationship? What's going on there? What are you doing? And so she's like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. I don't know who to go with. Like, I need to do this trip again so that way I have a job and I can get paid money. But and she's like freaking out about it. And so her brother is like, yo, why don't you go with my BFF, Cash? And she's like, I don't know. I don't know if I should go with him. But eventually she does, because she's like, the only way I can go on this trip is if I go with a person as a couple. And so they pretend to be a couple. I want to say it's in Jamaica. They pretend to be a couple in Jamaica. And it's a romance, so you know where it's going. For me, I really enjoyed this book. I feel like this book had a lot of really great bones, like the bones, the skeletons of this book. Really, really solid. My one gripe with this book was the pacing. The author just slowed down a little bit and add a little bit more detail, because there were times where I was like, oh, okay, there would be a character and he would be like, oh, I don't know if I should do this, and then 2 paragraphs later, I'm gonna do it. I'm like, there should be a little bit more hesitation. That's it. Just a little bit more hesitation. What I tend to do if I need a little bit more hesitation and a little bit more pause is I start adding the around the details, right? It's like, oh, this thing's going on over here, this thing's going on over there, da, da, da. But other than that, I felt like this was a great book. You know, it was a great idea. I just wish that they were a little bit meatier and they had a little bit more to them. So for that, I will give it a B. This book, it's a novella. It wasn't bad. Like, in the description, it was like a lot of sex, a lot of drama. It was a little too drama for me and my taste, right? A little too drama for me. So the main character, she's with this guy. He's like abusive to her. He's abusive to her. He's violent to her. He's really nasty. But she's like, his dick is just so good and I got to keep going back. And I know so many women like that in my real life. But that's what it was like. She was like, I gotta keep going back. I gotta keep going back to him. And I'm like, girl, leave him. And so anyway, she ends up with his friend. I don't know how they ended up together and having sex together, but she ends up with his friend and they're having sex, and then the ex comes back and he's like, I don't know. I can't even explain it to you. It was wild. It was really, really wild. That's all I remember. It was just sex every chapter, drama every chapter. And halfway through the novella, I was just like, what did I sign up for? What is this? I I can't be mad at the book because the description warned me. It was like a lot of sex, a lot of drama. But it was a lot. It was a lot for me. And so for that, I'm giving it a C. So this year, I was trying to read more of books by authors that I really loved in previous years. And I love The Sound of Stars by Alicia Dow. So I was like, let me read the rest of her books. I read The Kindred, and The Kindred is about these. So they're in a different solar system. I'll say that. Or not solar system, because solar system is our system because of Sol, the sun. But they're in another star system. They're in another star system. I want to say it's the Manchurian star system. And in this star system, 2 people are paired together. It's usually someone from a higher class is paired with someone of a lower class in order to create empathy between the classes, because there was a class struggle. The lower class overthrew the higher class. And so this was kind of their way to be like, hey, upper class people, let's not get out of touch with the lower class. I thought that was very creative. And so we start with Joy and Felix. Joy, who's this poor girl in Hari, I believe that was her planet. Very poor, and she's paired with a dude. This has been very controversial ever since the beginning, because they're like, well, because he's a duke, he should be placed with another, he should be paired with another royalty person. But they're like, no, we're gonna go by the system, and he's paired with Joy and Felix, because they're paired together. If they kill Joy, it could possibly kill Felix. So Felix escapes the castle, he gets Joy, and they're like, we're gonna go to a different system. And there's this planet called Terra. It's Earth. And so they end up on Earth, and they're trying to figure out who's after both of them, who's trying to kill them, why they're trying to kill them, what's going on. And it's also a romance. So This book has a lot going on. I love that. I think it's the most romantic. Like, Alicia Dow is just so good at writing feelings, deep, yearning. She's so good at writing that. Like, the feelings that these two have for each other, it is thick, it is deep. You can, oh, oh, I love this book. I love this book. Like, romance, romance, top tier romance. And something that I love about young adult romance, that adult romance has trouble with. And that's something I said earlier. A lot of times, some romance writers will just throw in a sex scene to avoid having to do the very difficult work of nailing out a plot. You don't have that luxury in young adult. Sex scenes do not belong in young adult because the young adult audience is for minors, and you will not show porn to minors, so you can't have sex scenes in young adult. That's the end of that conversation. And so, because of that, you have to be very creative and you have to be incredibly talented to write a convincing romance book. And Alicia Dow did it with The Kindred. And if you're someone that loves sci-fi and fantasy and also romance, like, this book has it all. It has it all. I will say my one gripe with this book, was like, these people traveled from another system, and the best thing they've ever heard is Taylor Swift. I'm like, blew my mind. Blew my mind. I was that, and then another thing, this joy comes from a planet is mainly of darker skinned people. That's how it's coded. But she couldn't find nobody to do her hair until she touched down in Florida. I'm like, those two for me, they were a little bit out there. But other than that, I think this book is perfect. It is an S tier book. You thought I wasn't going to do an S tier romance. This is an S tier romance for me. The romance was thick. It was thick. It was heavy. I'm like, yes, yearning. Yearning desire. That's all I want. That's all I want. And I got it. So, The Kindred. S tier. I love RVG. She's amazing. She is so incredibly talented. And this book was a reread for me. I read it in 2023. And so I was like, I'm in the mood to read that book again. When I first read it, though, I did have a lot of beef with it. And this is something that I've noticed about non-Black romance. They don't focus on the romance too heavy. And that's why I be wanting to fight them. So one thing, when I had first read it, I was like, where's the romance? I'm third way through the book. The two people that are supposed to be together in this romance, they barely even talk to each other. What is this? What is it? And that happens a lot of time when I read non-Black romance, even if it's romance with people of color. It's like they barely be interacting. And then at the end, they're having sex with each other. I'm like, I don't know y'all. Like, y'all barely even, what? So that was my main gripe with this book. Everything else about Witch of Wild Things, I absolutely love. It reminds me so much of Practical Magic. I would say Practical Magic more than Charmed, even though we do have these three magical sisters. It reminds me so much of like Practical Magic, and I just love it. And I love RVG and the way that she talks about the universe and her place in it, and how magical existence is, and how there's so much life and energy surrounding it. I love it. I love it. Oh, I love it. So I'm not rating this because it is a reread for me. And I will say, upon reread, the lack of romance did not bother me as much because I knew it was going to be there. So but I do really love the family saga, and the family saga continues in Lightning in Her Hands by Raquel Vasquez Gilliland, which I did read for the first time this year. I will say that this book had a lot more romance in it, and I really, really, really love that. I will say, okay, let me go to the summary of the book. So the book is Teal Flores. So book one, Witch of Wild Things, is about Sage Flores, the oldest sister. Book two is about Teal Flores, the middle sister. And so in this, her whole thing is like, she had a best friend. His name is Carter. They grew up together. And then after she had left her abusive ex-boyfriend, her and Carter hooked up. And then she was like, I can never speak to Carter again. I don't even think they had sex. I think they were just like making out heavily. And she was like, I can't ever speak to him again. And so in this, the premise of this thing is that she was going to invite Carter to her ex's wedding, which was the guy that she was with after the first ex, and after she kissed Carter, she dated someone else, and that guy's marrying someone else. And so she was going to his wedding, and she's like, "Well, you think Carter will be my date?" And Carter was like, "I'll agree to be your date if you agree to something that I have to do." And so the deal was, if you marry me, I can get my inheritance from my great grandfather or from my grandfather, and I will share that inheritance with you, because he will only let me, or my grandma will only let me have it if I'm married. So will you marry me? So that way. And so they do a fake marriage, or a marriage of convenience. And so I really love the romance in this book. I think it was so, so, so great. A lot better than in book one. I also love the continuation of the family saga, right? And that is one of my favorite parts. And I just really love book twos in series, when authors can really just go into the character development and really blow up the characters and blow up their, ugh, I love that. I love that shit so much. And so for all of those reasons, I really love book two. The one thing, my one gripe with it, is that Till Flores is unlike any RVG character. And I love RVG's characters. So for me, I was just like, I didn't like Till that much. I didn't like Till that much. She was not my favorite RVG character. And even when I was reading the back of the book, Raquel Vasquez Gilliland was like, Till is the most unlike me that I've ever written. And I was like, I can tell. I can tell. And I do really appreciate her for experimenting. But like that part of it, I was just like, oof, I don't care for Till. I don't, even by the end of it, didn't care for Till. But it's an A book for me. Like, RVG, she's so good. She's so good. She's so good. So it's an A book. I have been hyping up this book all year, ever since I knew it was coming out. I loved, love, love, love Wishful Thinking and Kiss and Spell by Celestine Martin. That's book one and book two of the series. What I really loved about it, whimsical Black people. And you know what? It was kind of opening the door for me. I've never read a merman in a romance before. And I was like, they're talking about his hard, thick tail. And I'm like, I'm listening. Okay. And then also a Faye Prince. And he's like, what did he call? Did he call her madam or darling? It was something like that. I was like, okay, I see it. I see it. So for this one, I was so excited for this book. And let's try and get into the summary. So Serena, she's like, oh my God, this month has been so bad for me. I haven't been able to do any of the things I want to do. She's unemployed. She wants a job. She tried out for this job. She didn't get it. And she's like, oh, I just wish I could redo October over again. And then she finds a wishing tea. And so she drinks the wishing tea. She does the spell, and she goes to sleep. Next morning, it's October 1st. She's doing October over again. And so now that she's doing October over again, she's going to make some different decisions. And one of those decisions that she makes is that she's going to spend more time with Gus, who is a magician, and he's also like the local historian. And so she's spending more time with Gus, and I guess that's the premise. For me, I was very disappointed that Gus was a magician. I was like, not a wizard. Like, it was just, we went from merman, Fae Prince, magician. And that wasn't making sense to me. Also, I feel like the premise was so good. Like, my October sucked. Let me redo it and let me make different decisions. I think that was really good. I just think the premise was not well executed. And here's the thing, I know that the author, I think she's a school teacher in real life. And I'm like, she probably had a busy year, probably had a lot going on, really couldn't focus on this book. But at the same time, I was like, I wanted it to be good so bad. Like, I was rooting for her. I know she knows how to write a good book. She's written two. She can do it again. I just, ugh. it failed for me. The romance, it was very lackluster. Like the whole time I was just like, why are these two people together? And they're like, we're fated and we're meant to be. It felt lazy to me. I'm like, I need to know. Like, I need to know, why are they supposed to be together? Why are we here? What's going on? I was really disappointed in this. I am still excited for book 4. That's Callie's book. Hopefully they're, if you want ideas for what the love interest should be, I'm looking for a werewolf romance. I'm not letting it go. I'm looking for a werewolf romance. So, if let's make the love interest a werewolf. I think she could do some really great things with that. But yeah, for me, Deja Brew is a D. I'm sorry. This is the last romance that I've read of this year. I actually got this for free through Amazon's free reads. And the story is of this girl, Elisa. She's having a falling out with her best friend and her roommate. And she's like, I need someplace else to stay. She's in college. She's like, I need another dorm to stay in. And so the dorm supervisor person is like, oh, found a dorm for you. You're lucky. Dorms usually aren't available in the middle of the semester. And so she goes to the dorm. She's like, great, love it here. She pulls up Rest Connect, which is this app that roommates can use. And she's like getting messages. And she's like, oh, this has to be a prank. Like, nobody else is in here. It's just me. And she finds out that the dorm that she's in is the dorm room of the guy who went missing 5 months before. And so she's going around. She's like, no, I'm being pranked. Someone's pretending to be him and messaging me. And then she finds out that actually, this is actually him. He's in October. She's in March. They're in the same dorm room, but at different times. And they're able to communicate across these times. So that's the premise of this story. I love this story. I loved it. I think it was so creative. It is a telling story. A lot of people get their pennies in the bunch about telling, show don't tell. That is propaganda, that is the only way to tell a book. Because when you look at a lot of Victorian literature, a lot of that shit is telling. But that's part of the canon. But if someone does that today, it's not good. Anyway, this is a telling book. Really well done. Very well executed. It was so creative. It was so fun. I was like up at 3 a.m. reading this book. I love when a book has me like that. I was up at 3 a.m. reading this book. I had so much fun. I think I'm going to read more books by Farrah Heron just because this was so good. The main character is Indian, and then her love interest is he Bangladeshi? He's South Asian. I'm not sure which country. He is South Asian. It was so good. It was so good. I just loved it. I think if I had to critique something about it, there was this like one plot point at the end where it was like, oh, this guy gets drunk and he can communicate with his past self when I'm like, okay, sure, whatever. I was like, whatever. Okay. Okay. But other than that, I just think this was a really great book. It's a really great book. It's a solid book. I would say it's new adult because it is a college romance. And it's an A book for me. Fantasy and sci-fi. And so the first book that I read this year was The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. This book is set in, I want to say 1600s, like an alternative colonial America. And it's this girl who's essentially in a cult, right? She's in a cult, and the girls are kind of raised up to one day be wives of the pastor. It's a very patriarchal cult. And her friend marries and gets pregnant by the preacher, the pastor. I think his name was the preacher, or the prophet. His name was the prophet. That's his name. His name was the prophet. Her friend gets like pregnant and married by the prophet. Mind you, the friend's like 15. The prophet's 50. No one can say anything because they're like, he's the prophet. We must worship him. It's between him and the divine. Blah, blah, blah. And so her friend kind of gets locked up. She doesn't see her friend anymore. She's like, what's going on? Her friend ends up dead. And so then she starts investigating the society they live in. There's a plague that's sent through there. I'm trying my best to remember it. Again, I read this at the top of the year. There's like a plague that's sent through there. As I read the whole thing, it was just kind of like, okay. I wouldn't say it was good or bad. I was just like, I'm okay with this. As I read each chapter, I was okay with it. I thought the writing was really solid. I really love like the setting of this patriarchal society, and I love the way they critique those things. And then there were the witches. This is the part that I had the most trouble with. So there were these witches. There's these four women who were in the woods. Can't remember. But what I do remember about reading this book is that there was not enough evidence for me to know that the witches were bad. We were just told the witches are bad. The witches are bad. Why? How? Where? And so, spoiler, when the main character kills the witches, I'm like, why would you do that? She kills the witches. She spares the prophet. But I just think it's funny because I'm like, the prophet raped and eventually had your best friend killed, because I believe the best friend died trying to give birth to that baby, right? Or no, or did he sacrifice her? No, I think he sacrificed her. It was something wild like that. So the prophet did all this devilment, terrorizing the city. He was trying to like assault her. He assaulted his own son because he didn't want his son to take over as the prophet. He wanted to be the prophet forever. And at the end of it, the girl's like, oh, I got to kill the witches, but let's keep the prophet alive. And I was like, there's not enough evidence for why the witches needed to die and the prophet didn't. And that was really my big beef with this. Like, I felt like the ending would have made or break this book, because a lot of the writing is really great. Characters are really great. They're very strong, which is what I love in a book. So when I got to the end, and I was just like, this ending is so convoluted and it does not make sense to me. And I also just felt very cowardice to be like, I'm gonna be the bigger person and I'm gonna let the prophet live after you killed the witches, when the witches ain't even do nothing. Anyway, that was my main beef with this book, was the way that it ended. It had me upset about it for a week. So for that, I'm gonna give it a B. I'm gonna give it a B. Like, it's great writing, but that ending, real lazy, real cowardly to me. So B. This is a sequel to The Gilded Ones. And The Gilded Ones is kind of similar to The Year of the Witching in that it is critiquing patriarchy. Um so the book one really critiques patriarchy and focuses on the gilded ones who have been trapped, these female goddesses who have been trapped in gold by the male goddesses, the Idugu. Oh my gosh. The names are one thing in your head, but when you say them out loud. But they have been trapped in gold by them. And so at the end of book one, they get them out. And then book two, they found out actually both sides are bad. Like, they're both evil and they're both like hurting and destroying each other. And so in book two, that's that. And so in book three, it's kind of like, I don't want to give it away if you haven't read a lot about book one and two, but book three is the resolution of that. I would just say that if you haven't read The Gilded Ones, that is a series I highly recommend. I think the first book is perfect. I would change nothing about the first book. The second book, I would change some things. The third book, I would change a lot more. But the first book, perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Namina Forna set the bar extremely high. Extremely, extremely high with that book. So I think this is an excellent series overall. With the Eternal Ones, I did feel like it was a lot slower pace than previous books in a way that I don't think was warranted. I'm like, a lot of this you can take out. A lot of this you can take out. And so I was very frustrated with that. At the same time, it was just such a really good ending. I love when series ends. I hate when people want to go on and on and on and on and on and milk something that should have ended a long time ago. I love when we can say, this is the end. Oh, I loved it. It was the end. It was an ending. I cried a lot throughout this book because it was just like, I've read these characters, I've been with these characters for so long. It was just really nice to get to this ending. It is a very satisfying ending. Kita and Dika, I love them. I love them so much. They're the main couple. They're so cute. So yeah, this is a really great book. It's a really great book. I love it. I will say it is slower paced than previous books, but overall, it is an A for me. I read Yellowface. Absolutely love Yellowface. I think it's a very, very, very brilliant book. Well done. So I was excited to get into Babel, which is it's about like this student who I'm going to try my best to, it's a 600-page book, so I'm going to try my best to explain it. But it's this student, his name's Robin. He goes to England, to Oxford. Is it Oxford? He goes to England to study for translation. Well, actually, he is the ward of Professor Lavelle. I believe that was that man's name. He's the ward of Professor Lavelle because his parents died, or his mom died in a through sickness. So he's been this man's ward, and this man has been training him to be able to go to Babel and be a translation scholar. So he's been training in all of these different languages, and he goes and he's part of the institution. And then he slowly is starting to see the way the institution is being used as a tool of oppression, the way that all of these immigrants are being used as tools of oppression. And so what I really loved about this book was that the political history of it, so much of it I did not know, and it was very exciting to like learn these things through this book. I love to be able to learn through a book. So I really like that, and I really love the translation lectures because I do like knowing the etymology of words and where words come from and why we use things and how we use them, and really love playing around with language. And I think that R.F. Kuang is really, really good at talking about colonization and power and oppression and things like that. My gripe with this book is that it should not be 560 pages long. I think at least 150 pages need to be cut, and I can tell you which pages should be cut. I felt like this book drained me. By the time I got to the end of it, I just was like, I don't know if I can ever read another book again in my life. Like, I just desperately wanted to end, and it just felt never ending. After the sixth translation lecture, I was done. I was like, girl, I get it. And I think that that was my thing. It just started becoming very redundant. I was like, I get it. I get it. Every chapter I read, I'm like, okay, I get it. I get it. I get it. I get it. And it was just like, oh, in case you didn't get it, here it is again. And so many people were talking about this book and being like, this book is so good. Everyone needs to read it. And so I'm like, when does it get good? 200 pages in. Well, it's going to get good. 300 pages. It's going to get good. 400 pages in. It's going to get good. It just didn't get good for me. And then when you got to the end and it's like the plot twist, I'm like, girl, I'm just so over it. I don't care no more. I don't care no more. The book took everything out of me. I just was like, oh, I don't even think I can ever read anything else by R.F. Kuang. Maybe she does something new that's a standalone that's more along the lines of Yellowface, but like, no. No. Babel, no. Babel broke me. Babel broke me. Like, I started DNFing books left and right after. I'm like, I'm not listening to y'all no more. You have led me astray. I read 600 pages of this goddamn book. I hate y'all. That overall, I would still give it a B. I think it's a really solid book. I think it is a really solid book. Should it be cut? Absolutely. But I'm a real Gordon Lish when it comes to editing. I'm like, cut everything. Only bare bones, only most essential, and a little bit of fat on them bones. Just tiny bit of meat. This made me want to quit reading entirely. Yeah. Yeah, this book broke me. I will say that I read this a couple months after Babel, so it gave me faith again. So it is this woman, or she's 19. She's 19. She's in a military academy. Her name's Akenna. Her grandfather just died. And so her grandfather's advisor is like, yo, I think this person well, no, she's not in the academy. She was supposed to go to the academy, and she's like, I don't think I'm gonna go. But then her grandfather's advisor comes to her and was like, I think your father's killer is in the academy, and I think you should go there, figure out who your grandfather's killer is, and you should kill him. And she's like, okay, I'll go to the academy now. And so she goes to the academy, and she's trying to figure out who kills her grandfather, right? While also having to conceal the fact that she has a blood gift, which in the kingdom that she's in, the blood gift could get her killed. And so it does deal a lot with like race, even though I don't think they explicitly call it race. They are like, oh, Akenna's darker skin, so she's more likely to come from this kingdom that we hate, and we hate those people. A lot going on. I love this book. I love this book. I love Akenna. She is filthy mouth. She is a strong woman. She is throwing punches first. She's head first into things. She's a very strong character, and I love reading strong characters. I remember getting to the end of the first chapter, and someone was like, Akenna, I don't want you to do this thing. And I was like, we already know she gonna do it. Like, that is how strong of a character she is. By the end of the first chapter, I already know who she is, what her values are, and from there she takes me on a journey. I had so much fun with this book. Never mind the fact there is a sex scene in here, and it's so abrupt that usually if something like that happens, I'm like, what in the world was that? But the fact that the characters were like, let's pretend this never happened, because that was awkward and I don't know what was going on, and it completely mimicked my react. I was like, this is great writing. This is great writing. This is great storytelling. Oh my god. I love this book. I love this book. It restored my faith in books after having to read Babel. I love this book. It was amazing. It is an A book for me. It's an A book for me. The sequel to The Blood Trials, and it is duology. A lot more sex in this book. So I was very excited about the a lot more sex. It was a very emotional book. And like I've said before, I love book twos of series because you really get to sit with the characters and they feel a lot more real to you, because the author tends to really flesh them out and really flesh out the stories, and we get more information than we did in book one, because we're just now getting introduced into the world in book one. But in book two, the world is established, so now we can get into the characters. This is what I love about book twos. I had some problems with this book. I think I forget what they were. I know that I had some problems with it, but it was still a very solid book, and I love the ending of it. I know some people didn't, because they're like, the ending implies there's still more work to do. But I kind of like when I get a glimpse of a world, if that makes sense. I know some people really hate it. They're like, I want everything to be fixed in this book, and I want a happy ending with not. I was like, well, I like unanswered questions, because now I get to think about those questions and really sit with them. So for me, I would give this book an A as well. I would say it's more like an A minus, where I think The Blood Trials is an A plus, but they're both really great books. So it's an A for me. This is a novella. I thought I read this last year. I did not think I read this year. This is a novella. It is my first novella that I read by Fonda Lee, and it is about the main character. She's training these big hawk like creatures to kill these like monsters, because these monsters will like the monsters kill her family. Let's just say that the monsters kill her family, and so she's having to train the hawks kill the monsters. I hope I'm making sense. They have fancy names, but I don't remember their fancy names. But the hawks kill the monsters, and the monsters kill her family. So she's trying to train a hawk so that way she can kill monsters to avenge her family's death. I think I got it. And so that's kind of where we are in this book. I think it was so creative. I think the language of it was really beautiful. Well done, beautiful, high quality writing. It was really amazing. So I think for me, I was curious about the creatures, because Fonda Lee did hint to the fact that like the creatures were coming out as their land was being taken. And I wanted to know more about that. And for me, I'm not sure if that was Fonda Lee's responsibility to tell me more, or if it was just something for me to sit with and to think about. the fact that we demonize creatures, and we could talk about all different types of people, right? We demonize creatures for attacking reasonably to what's going on in their environment because it does not benefit us, right? So these creatures were lashing out at humans because humans were taking their habitats, humans were taking their land, and they were losing their habitat. And so as a result, they're like, I ain't got no place to sleep, so let me attack these people who are taking my thing. And now the humans are like, obviously these creatures are bad, and we got to take them out because they shouldn't. So I thought that that was very interesting, and I just wanted to know more about it. But again, I'm not sure if that was Funda Lee's responsibility or if that was just something for me to sit with and to think about. So overall, great book, great novella, great writing. It's an A. So this is also a novella. It has the main character, Creeper. She is, I want to say, a 13-year-old girl who is in like a cyberpunk New Orleans in the 1800s. I really love the setting of this. Cyberpunk New Orleans 1800s is kind of an alternative history where like New Orleans has been free for a while. Some states, some southern states are free, and then some are still slave states, and then they're still fighting the Civil War, even though it's like the 1880s, because some people still have not backed down, and so they're still trying to do slave. There was a lot of the politics going on in the world building of this novella, but in the novella, Oya is Orisha of the storms. I know she's Orisha of the storms. She's Orisha of other things, but she is an Orisha, which is a African deity of the storms. And so he meets another woman who is blessed by Oshun, who is the Orisha of the rivers. And so together, the two of them have to work together to stop white people, the Confederates, from using the Black God's drums, which will allow them to put the Civil War in their favor. And so that way the South can win instead of the North. Right. Yeah. I think so. It's wild. I do appreciate the fact that it was novella. I love the setting of this New York. But for me, I was like, I am kind of, I don't know. I wasn't feeling it. I wasn't feeling it. It doesn't mean it's a bad book. I just wasn't feeling it. I am still thinking about reading Ring Shout by P. Jelly Clark, but Black God's Drums was just okay to me. So I'm going to give it a C. This is another Alicia Dow book. As I said, in this year, I was trying to read all of the books by authors that I really enjoy, and A Song of Salvation was the last one. It is a space opera where the main character, I believe her name is Zara. Zara has one of the goddesses. So there are two gods, right? She is the goddess of creation inside of her. And I'm trying my best. She is the goddess of creation inside of her. And so the male god, so the Alluri, who are the bad guys in book 1, A Sound of Stars. So the Alluri are trying to get that god out of her so that way they can control the god and Zara cannot. And so anyway, Zara's grandma is like, you gotta leave, you gotta get out of here, so that way you can save the universe from the Alluri. And so she ends up leaving. She meets Wesley. He's like, boarding school is a waste of my time. And so the two of them go together, in addition with Ruben, who is this like podcaster. So they go together with Ruben, and their mission is to go to Earth and to stop the Alluri from taking over. Because in book 1 of Sound of Stars, the Alluri have already taken over. And so they have to go there and fight the Alluri. I hope I'm saying everything right. And so what I really love about her whole series is that she's like, in order to fight the bad guys, we need music. We need songs, we need love, we need art, we need creativity, right? And it's not about violence, it's not about anger, it's not about hatred. We need to love each other. We need to get creative if we really want to fight evil. And that's what I really loved about the series as a whole. I was really upset with The Sound of Stars and the way that ended because it ended on a cliffhanger. So this book wrapped up a lot of that. So I was really excited about that. At the same time, I was just kind of, I don't know. I think something that Alicia Dow does extremely, extremely well is really thick, heavy feelings. And I feel like this was a space opera. Yeah, there was romance. It was extremely, extremely light. And I was like, maybe she's experimenting. Maybe she doesn't want a romance heavy book and she's just trying to experiment and be less romance. Because I know a lot of people who read sci-fi and fantasy, they want it without the romance in it. That is valid. There wasn't a lot of romance. And it's like this is the thing that I go to you for. Like, you were so good at writing it. Why are you not writing it? And so for me, I just like didn't care as I read this book. I'm so sorry, Alicia Dow. I know I gave The Kindred an S, but for me, A Song of Salvation is a D. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And the first book I read was We Deserve Monuments by Jazz Hammond. I want to say she's 16 and she moves from DC to Georgia because her grandmother is dying. And so while she's trying to learn about who her grandmother is, because she's never met her grandmother, because her mother and her grandma have been no contact for most of her life. So while she's trying to figure out who her grandma is at the end of her life, and while she's trying to adapt to living in a new school and meeting new people, and she's also trying to figure out what the South is and the values of the South, which I think is very interesting for someone coming from DC. She does not consider that the South, but she's trying to figure out what the South is, what the values of the South is, and she's trying to murder mystery because one of her friends' mother was mysteriously killed and they never found the killer. And so the girl thinks, oh, my dad killed my mom. So loved I love this book. This was the first book that I started 2024 with. I started on such a high note. Like Letty, Grandma Letty, or Mama Letty, she was hilarious. She reminded me so much of a lot of the like bitter old Black women that I grew up with. And then you find out like why she is the way that she is. And it just makes so much sense. Spoiler, slight spoiler. A lot of the reasons that Aunt Letty is as bitter as she is because her husband was lynched. And so she really struggled. After that, she struggled to raise her daughter, who's the main character's mom. She struggled for most of her life. And she was just known as this bitter, old, mean lady when a lot of times she was just heartbroken, right? And she was heartbroken because a whole bunch of white men got mad at her and was like, we're going to kill your husband. That's what you get for talking back. And it's just like when you think about racism and you think about white supremacy in that way, and the way that this has just been the reality of our country for so long, it just, I don't know. For me, it was a heartbreaking read. It was a heartbreaking read, but it was just so well executed that I would say We Deserve Monuments is an S tier book. I got another S tier book. See, it's Jazz Hammond's second book. It came out in May of this year. So this is one of my 2024 reads. It came out in May of this year. It is about this girl, and she's poor, but she's working at a country club. And so she's trying to be around a whole bunch of rich people. She's trying to fit in. And her rich girlfriend is trying to be a part of this like BIPOC sorority. And she wants to fit in with her rich girlfriend because right now she feels like an outsider, right? Her girlfriend's beautiful, she's rich, she's talented, she's all of these things, and the main character does not feel that way. And so in order to compensate for that, she drinks, and she drinks a lot because she's like, people like me when I'm drunk, and how it is destroying, honestly, her life. It is a very, very, very heavy book. Speaking of heavy, it does remind me a lot of Heavy because Heavy also talks about addiction. Heavy by Kiese Layman, which I want to talk about later because I did reread that this year. Heavy by Kiese Layman. It reminded me a lot of that, kind of like a young adult fiction version of Heavy. Extremely heavy book, extremely like full of really complex and complicated emotions. And I think that this is such a great book for young readers to have, because I don't know, I think kids are drinking and having sex and doing drugs a lot less than millennials and the rest of us were. But I think it is very important that they have models of like where they are in their lives and showing them ways through that. And I think that this could be a really good book, while also being gracious and not being super shaming towards people who are dealing with addiction problems as teens. And so overall, I just think Jazz Hammonds is an incredibly talented writer. I think this is well executed. Me personally, I would give this an A book. I do think it is as great and as well done as We Deserve Monuments. But me personally, it's an A. So this was a book that I did for review. It is a mafia romance, young adult, and multiple POV. So the main POV is this boy named Gabe. He's bipolar. His dad's like the mafia's lawyer or something. He's mafia adjacent. Anyway, Gabe's bipolar. He's dealing with bipolar, and then two, he's trying to free these young girls who are being sex trafficked. And so the sex traffickers are trying to kill him. Yeah, it's a wild story. It's a wild story. The sex traffickers are trying to kill him. And so this is like a four POV. One of them is Gabe, one of them is his on again off again girlfriend, one is his indigenous neighbor who has a really big crush on him, and then the other is his sister. And so those are the four POVs. One thing I think that CJ Simone did really, really well is the voices. Like each voice is so distinct and so clear, like you know who you're reading and what you're reading about. That was something that I really liked about this book. Something else, and this is a personal thing, Gabe reminded me a lot of Holden from The Catcher in the Rye, and I hated The Catcher in the Rye. That doesn't mean this is a bad book. That doesn't mean this is a bad book. I do not like The Catcher in the Rye. But if you like The Catcher in the Rye, I think you will really, really enjoy this book. I do not like The Catcher in the Rye, so I was like, I'm reading this for review. So for me, I'm not rating this because I was just supposed to read it and say, these are the things this author's doing well. If you like these sort of things, then read this book. So this is a multi POV as well. We have 3 different POVs of boys. I know there's 2 black boys, and I believe the other boy, he's Mexican. He's Hispanic. He might be Puerto Rican. I'm not sure. He's Hispanic. And so their principal ends up dead. These 3 boys all had beef with the principal. They also add POVs of the people in the community. And so it's really kind of like a mystery to figure out who killed the principal and why. And so these 3 boys, these 3 teen boys of color, are the main suspects. And we get a deep dive into each of their lives and to their beef with the principal and why they may have wanted him dead. And then at the end, it is revealed who kills the principal. One thing that I really liked about this book, and maybe I should read more books that have like black boy main characters, but I really love the juxtaposition between like the way that we view teenage boys of color and how they actually are. Because a lot of people are like, oh, this boy, he's 6 foot tall and he doesn't smile, he's a thug. Meanwhile, the boy is like a baby. He's a soft little baby. This is the thing. I have a nephew, he's 6 foot tall and he's 13 years old. Um, but he's a baby and he gets so mad at me when I say that, but I'm like, he's just a little tiny baby. He's just a baby. And they just don't get it. And so I just really loved reading this book where you have these boys and the perception of them is that they're violent and they're angry and they're just like soft and sweet and they're little baby boys. And yeah, sometimes they're like, yeah, I want to be tough and I want to be hard and stuff, but it's like the attempt of that, oh, I just think it's so sweet. I think they're so cute. I just thought they were cute little boys. I was like, oh, they're so adorable. But overall, I would probably give this book a B. Sonora Reyes. I actually found this book through a bookstagrammer, and she had posted about it. I've never heard it before. Just saw the picture through her. I don't know her bookstagram account, but her personal account is Black Tina Belcher. And if you are watching this video, you've probably seen her. But like, this is where I got this book recommendation from. Oh my gosh, what a book recommendation. It is about Ariana. The book starts with her coming back from this party, and she just has sex for the first time, but she's like, I don't feel good about it, and I don't know why I don't feel good about it. And so we find out that Ariana is a mostly nonverbal autistic girl, Mexican. She's a self-diagnosed autistic girl. Um, she's Mexican. Eventually, she finds out that she was sexually assaulted, and that is why she has this feeling about it. And so this has kind of been comped as John Tucker Must Die, which I did love the movie when it came out, and I love the gang of girls getting together to take down this boy who's being abusive, who's using his power to harm girls. And a few guys, I don't think he sexually assaulted the guys, but he was not a nice person. He was a very nasty person. And so it was really nice to see this guy get his due diligence. I love the representation of autism in this book. I thought it was really well done. Sonora Reyes being an autistic person themselves. I is I don't know what else I can say about it. Like, I just think this book is so good, high quality. I am torn between an S and an A. I I'm torn. I'm torn. You know what? I'm gonna say an A plus. I'm gonna say an A plus. We're gonna put it in A tier. I'm gonna say A plus. It was a really good book. Highly recommend it. It is this novel in verse, so it's poetry, and it's about this girl. Her name's Whimsy, Black girl. She's in a mental health hospital, and then she gets out of it. No, she meets a boy there. His name's Ferry. She gets out, and then he's her neighbor, and she's. It's a very experimental. It's a very experimental novel, so I'm having trouble explaining it. But the novel does delve into mental illness. It's mental illness through fairy tales and through the folklore and these types of stories. And I thought that that was very creative and interesting. At the same time, I don't think that this story was for me. I read Me Moth by Amber McBride. I really enjoyed Me Moth. I was like, if I was 15 and I had this story, I would have been obsessed with it. I would have been obsessed with it. It would have been my whole personality. I loved Me Moth. It was so good. And so I was really excited by We Are All So Good at Smiling. But I think for me, it was just like, I don't know. This is my problem a lot of times when it comes to poetry collections, because I'll read the first one and I'll be like, oh my gosh, it's so good. I love this author's style. They're really doing this, they're really doing that. And then the second collection kind of feels like it's the same. And so when I was reading We're Also Good at Smiling, I kept confusing it with Me Moth. And I was like, no, this is a different. And in my mind, they were just blurring together to the point where I was confused reading it. And again, could be a me thing. Could be a me thing. But no, like the whole time reading it, I was just like, I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea what's going on. Again, could definitely be a me thing, but I'm gonna give it a C. Sorry. Short stories, and I started with Drinking Coffee Elsewhere by ZZ Packer. I wanted to read this collection because I read Brownies years ago, which is a short story that is in this collection. I read Brownies. I really enjoyed that short story, and I was like, I want more of ZZ Packer. And so these are all story. I believe all the stories have Black characters, Black girls as their main characters. There may be some. I think there's some with Black women, but they mainly focus on Black girls and their stories. Brownies in particular is about um these Girl Scouts, they're brownies, these Girl Scouts, and to they go to a camp, and they're there with like a rival school. And was it a rival school? It was just another school. And so they ended up trying to like, they were beefing with those girls. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it, but I thought that that story was very creative. I thought it was cute. It really had the spirit of what it was like to be like 10 and just that. And I just thought it was well done. And so with this collection, I felt like the writing, great storytelling, but for me, it often felt like the stories were okay. That was the thing. That's like my beef sometimes with like the MFA style of writing. Like you read it and you're like, it's not bad. It's not good. It's just there. It's just there. And that's how I felt reading this whole collection. I was very disappointed because I just thought everything would be as good as Browning's, and it wasn't. There was this other story where this girl, she like ran away. Was she having sex with? I think she was. She like ran away, and then she was having sex with this guy who said that he was like a few years older than her, but then he was like twice her. He was like 34 and she was like 14. And he was like kind of, well, I don't think he was prostituting her, but then he had a girlfriend, and his girlfriend, it was a lot. But I think that was the most memorable for me, and that was probably one of my favorites of the whole collection. But like I said, the whole collection was just okay. It was just okay for me. So I would say a C. Isabel Allende. I am just including this. So technically I read 45 books and one short story, because I think the short story is like 19 or 20 pages. I don't remember it. I'm going to be honest. I don't remember it. I'm just including it here because I read it. Don't remember it. And so I'm just going to put it in the not rated category. This was another book that I read for review. Me and Jeffrey were both winners of the 2022 Courage to Write grant. And so that's how I was introduced to his book. Like, we're in the same cohort. So his book came out, my book came out. So I read this to support him and to help him get the word out that he has a book collection. It follows mostly Black queer men who try to live their lives as passively as possible while they are in these white spaces. And almost all of the short stories are like requiring these Black men to step up. Like there's something that's going on that's like, you need to address this racial thing that's going on around you. And it's reminding us that oftentimes in the society that we live in, Blackness is demanding something of us. Like we cannot be Black and be passive. We have to do something. And so that's really what I liked about this collection. I would say my favorite one, it is this sci-fi novelette that's like in the middle of it. I'm like, this was like it's a Black Mirror episode. My eyes were glued to the page, and I'm like, I want more of this. I love it. I love it. I love it. So overall, I do think that this is a very solid collection. I know it won, I want to say, the Iron Horse Prize. So it is an award-winning collection. I feel like not enough people know about it. And if you are interested in something like this, definitely go check it out. So, but I'm putting it in not rated because I did it for review. So I was very excited about this. A Black girl horror anthology. And after reading the first two short stories, it did not disappoint. I am going to say I'm terrified of flesh pedestrians. You put that in a short story, I'm already scared. That is the scariest thing in the world to me. And so the first short story was that. And I'm like, oh my God, what have I gotten into? And I will say in the middle, it was kind of like going in and out between being scary and just being like folklory, which I'm not mad at, but I'm expecting really intense things. But I will say there were quite a few stories where it's like the Black girl survives in this one, but barely. Like I because I have to remember, I'm like, no, she's gonna survive. She's the final girl. But I'm like, the way that it was left off, I'm like, I don't know if she gonna make it. I don't know if she gonna make it. I'm sorry. This was such a good collection. It was so much fun, and I actually found a lot of new writers whose books that I'm going to read in 2025. So I'm excited about that as well. I highly recommend this. It is an A for me. So this is an older book. It came out in the 1990s. I want to say 92 or 93. And it was a highly recommended book to me from a friend of mine. So that is why I read the whole thing, because if it was up to me, I would have DNF'd it. I'm going to be honest. I would have DNF'd it. It was very slow. I'm currently reading another book that's written in the 90s, and it's like the girls. I'm trying to be accepting of the fact that storytelling has a lot of different forms. And sometimes I am in the mood for those slow moving, winding, lingering stories. But when it came to this one, I just was not in the mood for it. I really wasn't. I was over it. I was like, no. No, I'm just not in the mood for this. I'm not in the mood for it. And so for that reason, I would give it a C. It's not that it did anything bad. Like I thought a lot of the stories were like well done, very interesting ideas, but overall, I just was not in the mood for this book at all. And I was just like, I need something fast. I think right after this, I read the Anise Star book. And so I was like, oh, this is what I needed. And then I went back. I think I read Sula or something after then, because I was like, now I can slow down. But I just needed something really quick, and then I can slow down again. So I need variation in like genre and length and pacing all the time. I just cannot. Oh, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Doesn't mean it's a bad book. Doesn't mean it's a bad book. I could not do it. So the same person that recommended the Randall Keenan book to me also recommended this to me. So I was excited about this as well. It was recommended as a horror anthology that was inspired by the pandemic, and some of them I kind of got, like the wishing pool story, the title story. I really enjoyed that one. And there was another one. Was that this? So I keep getting confused if it's the wishing pool or if it's the Black Girl Survives this one. Because sometimes the wishing pool, Tanana Reeve do would write stories that were like young Black girls. So I keep getting it confused which stories come from which book. There were quite a few that I was just like, okay. I am interested in reading more Tanana Reeve do. I actually met her at Vona way back in the day. I met her virtually at Vona in 2020. And she had talked about how like she was a career author and how she had published back to back to back, and she does not recommend that because it's very feast and famine. And sometimes you're not able to get out the best book that you want. Sometimes you're just doing the best book you got at the time. And you may want it to be better, but the book got to get published, so it's getting published. So I'm like, I get that. But I am interested in reading more Tanana Reeve do. So if you have a favorite book, I know about, is it The Repository? I think that's what it's called. I know about that. So if you have any other recommendations, please let me know. Because I would like to read more Tanana Reeve. Like, I'm not, she's a great writer, very talented. But I just want to read something that I think is more up my alley and not have to read things I think are not up my alley. And so I read The Death of Vivek Oji by Kweke Emezi. I read Pet. I read Pet when it came out, like 2019, I want to say. I read Pet and I really, really enjoyed that book. Then I read You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty. That was interesting. And that led me to The Death of Vivek Oji. Beautiful writing. I think Kweke Emezi is an incredibly talented author. Really, really loves to write about things that are super uncomfy. This book. So The Death of Vivek Oji, the book is kind of going in circles to tell us about who Vivek Oji is and that they died and how they died, right? Where Vivek Oji comes from and what's going on surrounding Vivek's death. I think it was very beautiful. I think it was well executed. Akweke loves some strange scenarios. And so if you've read this book, you know what I'm talking about. And this is a spoiler if you haven't read it. Vivek and Vivek's cousin, I love the relationship between them because it shows the hypocrisy of it, right? They're cousins who are having sex with each other. And people would have been more upset about the fact that they were both born as males than the fact that they're cousins. And I was just like, meanwhile, I'm like, the cousins who love each other are really loving each other. Okay, this is very uncomfy for me. Okay. Akweke loves an uncomfortable. That's what I've learned from reading the 3 books I've read about Akweke. I am kind of interested in Akweke's like nonfiction. I may continue to read Akweke Amezi, but after the death of Vivek Oji, I'm like, oh, I got to be in the right mindset. I know Little Rock came out this year. I was like, I don't know. I don't know. Let me take a break and come back, and I'll see if it's something. I would, you know what? I'm going to give it a personal rating because I do think it is a very well done and well executed book. But personally, I would give it a B. So this book starts with one is literary, and so literary tends to go from like different POVs, right? But it starts with the granddaughter who has this like becoming a woman ceremony kind of. Her parents are there and her grandparents are hosting it because her grandparents are the main ones taking care of her in addition to her father. But she's having a like becoming a woman ceremony and she's dressing up and her parents are there. And so you kind of find out about her parents' relationship, her grandparents' relationship. On the back of the book, it does talk about how like this is going to be part of the Tulsa Race Massacre, but I found that that was just talked about in passing. It's more so about family dynamics, and I want to say it's similar to We Deserve Monuments in that it's showing the way that white supremacy has impacted Black families, often in a very negative way, and have not allowed Black families to be as full and as whole and as loving as they can be. So that's really what I got from it. But like the writing in this is beautiful, it's gorgeous, it's spectacular. Something that I love about poets is that they can get right to the heart of something. Because when you have to write a poem, when you have to write a whole story in that much space, you can get to the heart of something real quick. This is what I loved about Memorial Drive by Natasha Trethewey, also a poet, a Mississippi. She was Mississippi Poet Laureate. She really got to the heart of a story in so few words. And I would say the same for Red at the Bone. I think on my Kindle it says a 3-hour read. So very short. You can finish it in an afternoon. I finished it in an afternoon. But the writing is gorgeous. The characters are so well developed. Like it is such a developed story. I'm in tears sobbing because of how quickly and how effectively I was able to connect to the characters and connect to the story. I'm like, oh my God, I love it. 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 Oh my God. Cannot recommend this book enough. Everything about it is perfect. Literally, after I read, I don't even think it's in chapters, but after I read that first little section, I immediately texted my friend and was like, you have to read Read at the Bone by Jacqueline Wilson. So good. So good. This is my second book by Jacqueline Wilson. I read Brown Girl Dreaming a few years ago. It really reminded me. So she had a best friend who was Hispanic, and I believe it is memoir. It may be like fiction based on real life, but I believe it is memoir, like memoir in verse. So well done, so beautiful. It reminded me of my best friend when I was around that age, like 11. My best friend was Mexican. And so I was like reminded of her and the friendship that we had together. Ugh, I just think Jacqueline Wilson is incredibly talented, and I will definitely be reading more Jacqueline Wilson in 2025. I read this book because American Fiction came out. There were a lot of book reviewers talking about how just don't even bother with the movie, read the book. And so I read the book. This book did remind me a lot of Yellowface in that both of them were critiquing the publishing industry and the expectations for BIPOC authors. And so I really like that part because the main character, Monk, I believe that's his name, the main character writes very dry, very academic writing. He has an agent. His agent's like, you need to write something that's going to sell. Like, not some that you spend forever on that sells 2 copies. Like, we need to get some books moving. And he's like, you just don't understand about literature and language. And they just like, okay, whatever. And so, anyway, this black woman who who wrote a book, We Lives in the Ghetto. I thought it was hilarious. Who wrote this book? And it was just like, wow. And it's very, very bad AAVE thing about this book and how great it was and how it was a true depiction of real Black life, you know? And so he was like, I'm going to make one called My Pathology. Terrible. It's like extremely problematic main character, super abusive, beating up on people, raping people, doing drugs, with the guns, like all the bad stereotypes about Black people. The book's a hit. And so, and so that's really what this book is about. And it's this man who's kind of having this crisis because he's like, people only like me as a Black person if I'm able to, you know, fulfill these stereotypes, but I'm not that kind of Black person. But the Black person I am isn't Black enough unless I'm this sort of Black. And so it's like this whole like identity and who is he, and what does he really stand for, and what does this mean for his place in publishing and in academia if he's only valued for being fake and for adhering to something that isn't real to him but other people think is real because that's what they really want to hear about how Black people actually are in real life. And it's a lot. It's a lot. But again, it's literary fiction. I think that Percival Everett's talented writer. There were several parts where I was laughing, especially my pathology, because it's so outrageous. And especially to see the tone shift between like this very, I believe it's in first person. So Thelonious Monk is very like academic, I'm gonna say it, very uppity, and then go from him to like Zagar Lee. It was very interesting. Overall, I would give it a B though. I would not give it an A, I would give it a B. But I still think it was a fun book. And so if you want to read something like that, I do recommend it. This was a reread for me. So Sula is it's literary fiction. It's more so about the town of in the town called Bottom. The town of Bottom and Sula and her family and how they came to be. So Toni Morrison's writing is often about that. It's not just about the individual, it's often about the community, the values of the community and what's going on. And with Sula, it's mainly about the Black sheep and how so many people will put all the negative things on one person in a community and make them bear the brunt of everything that they don't want to deal with. That's kind of how I interpret Subla. And so I remember when I was talking with my friend, so I'm talking about the same person when I was talking about the let the dead bury their dead wishing pool. And so I was talking with her about Sula because she had talked about, she first read it when she was 19 and then she reread it again at like 23 and then reread it again in 27, and each time her feelings about Sula changed. The first time I read it I was 25 and I was like, Sula's not a victim, she's just doing the things that like she had been taught and that she, you know, saw in her community. She saw her mom fucking everybody else's man, so she's like, oh, I'm gonna do that too. That was normal to her, right? And the second time I read it though, I was like, be the bad guy. Because I did not realize how quickly after meeting Nell's husband, they were in the bed together. And I was like, I thought there was more time. But no, it was like, oh, meet Nell's husband. Next page, they're in the bed together. I'm like, you know what? Maybe my friend has some points. Maybe Sula's not a great person. But it's not really about is Sula good or bad or good or evil. It's more so about the things that were put onto her and how she was made to be evil and how people justified the things they did to her because she was an evil person. It was more so about that. So yeah, upon rereading it, it kind of had me reevaluating a lot of how I saw Sula Peace. So I'm gonna put this in the not rated category. So I saw this movie when it came out in theaters. I went to theaters to go see it. Beautiful movie. I'm in tears. Granted, I'm always in tears when I watch a movie. Beautiful movie. Beautiful movie. And so this year, I don't know what it was. It was Black August. And I was like, I really want to read James Baldwin. And I thought about that movie. So I was like, let me read the book. And for those who don't know, Black August is this month where you remember political prisoners who were fighting for Black liberation. And so it's like people who want Black people to be free, Black people to have rights, and the US government put those people in jail because they're like, how dare you, right? And so it's remembering that with Tish going to see Fonny, who is her boyfriend, or I think they're engaged, right? I think that's her fiance. And she's telling him, I'm pregnant. And he's so excited about it. And he's like, oh, I can't wait till I get out of jail so that way I can see you. And we can finally have our baby. And we can finally have our apartment. We can live together. We can do all these things. And we find out that Fonny is in jail for rape conviction, right? And so the book kind of follows his family as Tish gets further and further along in her pregnancy, and them having to deal with the American legal system, trying to get Fonny out of jail because they know he's innocent. They know he didn't rape this woman the police officer has against Fonny. But because the way the system is set up, it's almost impossible to get him out. So everybody's working really hard. Everyone's fighting. Everyone's trying to save up money. They're doing whatever they can to get him out so that way he can live the life that he was meant to live and not be behind bars. And so, what I really love about this book is that the prose is so tender and is so delicate. This is my second James Baldwin book. It is my favorite by far. Mainly because of that reason. It's such like this tender, delicate story. The characters, even though these characters are poor and they're struggling, there's so much warmth and there's so much love between them. And it just really flows from one chapter to the next. And I just, oh, I don't know. This well, for Black August, I read it for Black August because I think that it was a really great reminder that like Black people are always at risk of being political prisoners in the United States for the simple act of being Black and trying to live as freely as possible. You don't really have to do a lot, right, to get thrown into jail as a Black person. He did his thing. he did his big one on this. This, I'm gonna say, this is an S book. This is an S tier book for me. It's just so good. It's so good. It's so tender. It's so delicate. It's so soft. It's so sweet. It's so warm. It's so loving. I'm like, oh, it's so good. It's so good. Miscellaneous. And let's start with Hoodoo by Ronald L. Smith. So Hoodoo follows this young boy named Hoodoo, and I'm going to try my best. It's a middle grade horror book. And I believe that Hoodoo, like, how did he conjure this man? This man came out of nowhere, or he came out of somewhere, and he's trying to get Hoodoo for some reason. And I don't know why. I forgot. I'm going to be honest with you. I forgot, but I thought that this book was very interesting. I will say I'm not the target audience for middle grade. That is for like 9 through 12 years old. I'm not the target audience for it. But I did think that this book was very interesting in that it was trying to introduce Hoodoo, which is a Black American folk system, to children. So I don't even know if this would be scary for a child. It may be. It may be scary for a child. I have a very high threshold when it comes to being scared in books because I find a lot of horror not scary. I am not the target audience for this, but if you have little ones who may like scary books like Goosebumps and stuff, this could be a really good book for them. I will say, when I was 8, 9, 10, terrified of Goosebumps. I was terrified of Goosebumps. Now I could probably read it. I could probably read it now. But when I was younger, I was terrified. So maybe this would be a really scary book for young people. I'm not rating it because it's not marketed towards me. It's marketed towards children, not me. It is like a poetry play, really experimental. Really experimental. I really want to see this performed. This is the thing with a lot of books. Some things I think are better in other formats. And this is a play. I would prefer to see it as a play as opposed to reading it. Because I think as a play would make a lot more sense to me. But reading it, I was very confused. I was very confused. I desperately want to see a play of this performed, because I think it would make a lot more sense to me and I would get a lot better. I did watch For Color Girls by Tyler Perry. So I kind of knew about the Bo Willie situation and that. But yeah, when they really opened up on the excerpts of everything, I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I don't know. I want to see it performed. I want to see it performed. That was really my main takeaway from reading it. I was like, I want to see it performed. I want to see it because I think that I would enjoy it a lot better if it was performed. So I'm gonna say I'm not gonna rate this. Not gonna rate it because I want to see it performed. I don't like the format that I consumed it in. This is a nonfiction book that focuses on race, religion, and feminism. And so this was a very interesting book for me. I think I had read it. Is another book that I got off of Book Talk because someone was reading it in relations to marriage, and I had just gotten separated. So I was like, let me read it about marriage. But instead, what I got was like the erasure of women, Black people, but it's specifically Black women from Christianity and from depictions of the divine. Tidbits that I found interesting, like one, Yahweh, who is the God of the Old Testament in the Christian Bible, Yahweh being compared to a rain deity like Zeus. And I was like, oh my God, yeah. How, I don't know why I never put something like that together. I'm like, the God in the Bible is Zeus. Like, not exactly, but they are similar, right? I'm like, bro, what? But it makes so much sense because God gets angry, floods the earth. Everything's about water. They're praying to God, be like, hey, yo, can you send some rain? Do my crops? Like, all of that. Like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. The God in the Bible is a rain deity. So she's trying to walk to all the Black Madonnas in France while also thinking about her relationship to Christianity and to Black women as being divine beings while she does this. So if that is interesting to you, I would definitely say check it out. As for me, I would give it a B. I would give it a B. It is a memoir about this Black boy who's growing up in Mississippi, who's dealing with food addiction, sexual violence, and just the overall burden of being a young Black boy in a world that hates Black boys. And so this is my second time reading Heavy by Kiese. I mean, the first time I read it, it was heavy. I was like, that is aptly named. There's so much going on in here. The second time I read it, it was a lot easier to read because I knew a lot of what the heavy parts was, so it wasn't a surprise to me. And I was really able to get more into the story and to learn more. And it had been about like 5 years since I read it the first time. So since then, I've heard Kesse speak several times about this book. And so I was like, oh, I finally see what he's talking about because now I'm reading it with the knowledge of all the things that he told me about it. So I was like, oh, okay. Like now I can see these sorts of things. So that was cool for me. And I also realized how much his young adulthood influenced his fiction book, Long Division. Because I'm like, that second part, I think the chapter's Ben, 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 and that I believe it was that chapter. I was like, that just sounds like Long Division. It sounds like a chapter out of Long Division. So I think for me, it was very interesting to see like all of his writing coming together. Not rated because again, this was a reread for me. This is a self-help book, particularly for autistic people, but it can be for a lot of neurodivergent people. And a lot of it is meant to provide, I think it's called like 100 plus ways of like self-care for autistic people. And it was recommended to me from another autistic person because they were like, oh my gosh, this book was life-changing for me. I've been through a lot of therapy and an extreme amount of therapy. Um, and a lot of the things that she was pointing out were things that I had learned in therapy throughout my years of therapy. So for me, the book was not helpful. But that does not mean the book would not be helpful for you. I say that because like I was like, oh my gosh, I already know all this. And I was expecting to learn something new and I didn't. So I was a little disappointed in that. But I think if you have not been through a shit ton of therapy and you read this book, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, this book is life changing for me. And so for that reason, I do recommend it. I do recommend it if you have not been through a lot of therapy, if you know that you're a neurodivergent person and you know you struggle with a lot of things, I do recommend this book. But it's a B for me. It is a picture book that was sent to me to review. And so the picture book follows this little girl on her Saturday and all of these like hoodoo things that she does with her family as she's trying to figure out the meaning of her dream. It is a very cute story, and the characters in there are beautifully illustrated. So I do recommend this for young ones. Again, I am not a child, so not the target audience of it, but I do think that it would be a cute story to read to your little children. I may read it to my 5-year-old nephew. Um, will he understand what's going on? Probably not, but he will like the pictures. I don't even know where to start with this book. So Juju Bay is a podcaster. She's now an author. She was on the Hulu paranormal series Living for the Dead, and so she wrote this book as kind of like a comprehensive guide to Africana spirituality. She is an Ifa priestess, I believe, and she's also a hoodoo, and she calls herself a bad bitch, which I love Juju Bay. I'm just gonna say I love Juju Bay. I am a devout listener of her podcast. Her podcast is the reason why me and my podcast co-host started our podcast, because we are heavily inspired by her work. And this book is no exception. I had a friend ask me, how do I do an ancestral elevation? And I'm like, let me go check this book and see what Juju said about it. And so I just sent that to her. So I love this book. I am constantly using it as a guide ever since I read it in its entirety this summer. I do think that this book is, honestly, I recommend this book for all people who practice some African-based system, or all people who want to know more. And I think that Juju told it in a way that's very straightforward while also being very like warm and comforting. So again, highly recommend it. For me, this is an S tier book. This is an S tier book, and now we're finally at the end of all the books I read for 2024. I know this is a very long video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I'm very excited for 2025. I think I am moving away from Bookstagram. I am moving away from like book influencers and their recommendations, which I think is hilarious, as I am giving recommendations on books. But a lot of it is like, I really want to find books that I am feral for. I really want to find books that I really love. I felt like 2024 was a mid reading year for me, because I was trying to read a lot of books that other people were reading, because I wanted to be, part of the book influencing spaces. And for me, it just didn't work out, I don't think. And I have a pretty good idea of what my tastes are and what I enjoy and what I like in books. So I want to get back into doing that for 2025. Please give me your recommendations below. Not Kimberly Lemming, but I'm still on the hunt for that. I'm still going to try to read books by Black female authors, especially classics. Speaking of classics, I was at my grandma's house for the holidays, and she was going through her books, and she loaned them to me. I have to give them back. But she gave me these, which is Tina McElroy Anza, who passed in September of 2024. And I read Ugly Ways by Tina McElroy Anza. I have The Hand I Fan With. That's what I'm currently reading. It's a paranormal romance where she's like romancing a ghost. It's a bit slower than I would like it to be, but I'm trying to be patient with this book. And then I also have this, You Know Better. I was not a huge fan of Ugly Ways. It was fine. I think it was a fine book, solid. I wasn't, you know, I wasn't fair for it, but I am reading more Tina McElroy Anza, and then I also have these books by Brenda Jackson. I know she is a classic Black romance author, so I do want to read more of that. And then I know my grandma has some Beverly Jenkins in storage, so maybe she can give me some of her recommendations out of those as well. So that is what I'm planning on doing in 2025. Really reading authors who I have previously loved, trying to read more Black classics, and just really trying to focus on what I enjoy and sharing those books with y'all. For Oathbound by Tracy Dion, when that comes out, we may have a party. So there are a lot of things I'm excited. Also, my book is coming out about the boy that is coming out January 2025. Young adult contemporary romance in a small town with forced proximity for lab partners. This long video. And that's it. I'm leaving. Bye.